The rain had stopped just minutes before she spoke to him, as if the sky itself wanted to hear what a little girl would dare to ask a billionaire. The city plaza shimmered with leftover puddles, reflecting glass towers and passing headlights like fractured dreams. He stood there alone despite the quiet swarm of security at a distance. Ethan Vale, the youngest self-made billionaire in the country, known for turning broken companies into gold and for never smiling in public. Cameras usually followed him like shadows. Today there were none. That was why what happened next would never make the headlines, but it would change everything. She couldn't have been more than 7. Her shoes were 2 sizes too big, tied with fraying string, and her coat had lost its color years ago. Dirt smudged her cheeks, but her eyes were startling wide, steady, and unafraid. She waited until he finished his call, until his voice calm, efficient, emotionless cut off mid-sentence. Then she stepped forward, small hands clenched around the hem of her coat. "Mister," she said softly, as if afraid the word might break. He turned, irritation ready on his face, and then it faltered. Something about her gaze stopped him. People usually wanted something from him: money, power, proximity. This girl looked like she wanted certainty. "Yes?" he asked, already reaching for a polite exit. She swallowed. "Will you be my dad?" The world didn't stop. Cars passed. A fountain hissed behind them. But inside Ethan Vale, something cracked so sharply he felt it in his chest. He stared at her, sure he'd misheard. Children asked for autographs sometimes, or favors. Never this. "I'm sorry," he said, voice suddenly rough. "What did you say?" She repeated it, slower this time, as if explaining a simple truth to an adult who didn't understand. "I don't have one. And you look like someone who could be." His throat tightened. A laugh tried to escape and failed. "That's not how it works," he said, too quickly. "Where are your parents?" "Your mother." The girl shook her head. "She's gone. A long time now." She paused, studying his face with unsettling care. "But you're not gone." Something in the way she said it like a verdict made his eyes sting. He turned away abruptly, pretending to check his watch, but the blur wouldn't clear. He hadn't cried in years. Not at boardroom betrayals, not at hostile takeovers, not even at funerals. And yet tears gathered now, unwelcome and hot. From the edge of the plaza, his head of security shifted, alert. Ethan raised a hand without looking. "Not yet." "What's your name?" he asked. "Lena." "Lena," he repeated, tasting the sound. "You can't just ask strangers to be your dad." "You're not a stranger," she said. "I know you." He almost snapped back, but curiosity slipped through the crack in his composure. "You do." She nodded. "You were on a big screen at the shelter once. They said you built hospitals and schools. They said you don't have a family." Her voice dropped. "I don't either." There it was, the quiet collision of 2 empty spaces. Ethan felt exposed, as if the girl had read a page of his life he kept locked away. He had grown up in foster homes, learned early that attachments were liabilities. He built his empire on control, on never needing anyone. And now a child stood before him, asking for the one thing he'd convinced himself he didn't want. "Where do you live, Lena?" he asked gently. She pointed toward the underpass beyond the plaza. "Sometimes there. Sometimes wherever it's warm." His chest tightened again. "Do you have someone looking after you?" She hesitated. "I look after me." He closed his eyes for a second, the weight of the city pressing in. This was not his problem, he told himself. He could call child services, write a check, walk away. That was the sensible thing, the safe thing. Yet his feet refused to move. If this story is already pulling at your heart, take a moment right now to like the video and subscribe to the channel, because stories like this don't just entertain, they stay with you. Ethan crouched to her level, ignoring the dampness seeping into his tailored trousers. "Lena, I can help you. But I can't be the word caught. Dad. Your father." She didn't cry. She didn't beg. She simply reached into her pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper, worn soft at the creases. "Then can you tell me why this has your name on it?" His breath stopped. He took the paper with shaking fingers. It was a hospital discharge form, years old, the ink faded but legible. His name was there, unmistakable. Ethan Vale. And beneath it, a date that punched him backward in time 9 months before Lena would have been born. "That's impossible," he whispered. "My mom said you'd say that," Lena replied calmly. "She said you didn't know." A roar filled his ears. The plaza tilted. Memories surged: an emergency surgery overseas, a woman with tired eyes who'd held his hand before anesthesia took him under, paperwork signed in a blur. He'd never asked questions. He'd never looked back. "Where did you get this?" he demanded, then softened his tone when she flinched. "I mean, how long have you had it?" "Since she died," Lena said. "She told me to find you when I was brave enough." Ethan stood abruptly, pacing 2 steps away, then back. His security team edged closer, confused by his agitation. He waved them off again. This couldn't be real. And yet the dates, the signatures, they gnawed at him with relentless logic. "Why me?" he asked, voice breaking despite himself. "Why now?" "Because I'm tired of being alone," she said simply. "And you look like you are too." The words landed harder than any accusation. Ethan Vale, the man who commanded rooms and markets, felt utterly undone by a child who saw through him with terrifying clarity. He looked at Lena again, not as a stranger, but as a question he'd been avoiding his entire life. Sirens wailed somewhere nearby. His phone buzzed in his pocket, urgent messages, deals waiting, a life demanding his return. He ignored it all, staring at the paper in his hand, at the girl who might not be lying, at the future threatening to rewrite his past. "Come with me," he said finally, unsure whether he was asking or telling. "Where?" Lena asked. He opened his mouth to answer and realized he didn't know. He stood frozen, the question echoing inside him louder than the traffic around them. "Where?" The word exposed how carefully his life had been constructed to avoid exactly this moment. Homes were investments to him, penthouses with walls too white to hold memories. Boardrooms were safer than kitchens. Silence was safer than bedtime stories. Yet Lena waited, rainwater dripping from her sleeves, trusting him with a patience that felt heavier than expectation. "To get you warm," he said at last, choosing the only truth he could manage. "And fed." She nodded, as if that alone settled everything. He signaled to his security team, giving instructions in a low voice. Their eyes flicked to the girl, then back to him, reading the tension in his jaw. One of them opened an umbrella, holding it carefully over Lena as if she were made of glass. She looked up at Ethan, surprised. "They don't usually do that," she whispered. "Do what?" "Care." The word struck him harder than before. He turned away quickly, leading her toward the waiting car. The door closed with a soft click that sounded too final. Lena sat stiffly on the edge of the leather seat, hands folded in her lap, afraid to touch anything. Ethan noticed and felt something twist inside him. "It's okay," he said. "You can sit back." She obeyed, eyes roaming the interior like she was afraid it might disappear. As the car pulled away, the city blurred past the windows. Lena pressed her forehead to the glass. "Have you been in a car like this before?" he asked. She shook her head. "Only buses. Sometimes trucks, if the driver was nice." He nodded, jaw tight. Silence settled between them, thick and fragile. He kept glancing at her reflection in the tinted glass, searching for familiarity, for proof. He saw her nose small, slightly crooked. His own nose had been broken once in a schoolyard fight. He saw the curve of her mouth when she concentrated. He remembered a woman overseas who smiled the same way when she thought no one was looking. "Your mom," he said quietly. "What was her name?" "Mara." The name hit him like a ghost brushing past. Mara. He closed his eyes briefly, memories snapping into focus. The hospital room smelled of antiseptic. Her hand had been warm, reassuring him before surgery. She'd joked to hide her fear. He'd promised to check on her after he recovered. He never did. "Did she ever talk about me?" he asked. "Sometimes," Lena said. "She said you were kind when you were scared. She said that mattered." He swallowed hard. Kind when scared. He hadn't thought of himself as kind in a very long time. The car stopped at one of his private residences, a townhouse rarely used, staffed but impersonal. As they stepped inside, Lena hesitated, clutching the sleeve of his coat. He stopped immediately. "What is it?" "Will I have to leave later?" she asked, eyes fixed on the floor. The question carried no accusation, only preparation. He knelt in front of her, forcing himself to meet her gaze. "I don't know yet," he admitted, "but I won't let anything bad happen to you tonight." She considered this, then nodded once, as if filing it away. He led her inside. Staff members froze when they saw the child, surprise flashing across their faces. Ethan gave clipped instructions: food, clothes, a bath prepared. The words felt unreal in his mouth. While Lena was taken upstairs by a housekeeper, Ethan retreated to his study. He shut the door and leaned against it, breathing hard. His hands shook as he pulled the discharge paper from his pocket again. He stared at his own signature, the date, the hospital seal. It all lined up too perfectly to dismiss. His phone buzzed again. This time he answered. "Cancel everything," he said before his assistant could speak. "I'm unavailable." There was a pause. "For how long?" Ethan looked toward the staircase. "I don't know." When he hung up, he sank into the chair behind his desk. Logic told him to call lawyers, investigators, doctors. Logic told him this could be a trap. But logic was losing ground to something older, quieter, and far more dangerous: hope. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. "Mr. Vale," the housekeeper said gently. "She's ready." He followed her upstairs to a guest room where Lena sat on the bed, hair damp and wrapped in a towel, wearing clothes far too big for her. She looked up when he entered, uncertainty flickering across her face. "Is this okay?" she asked, tugging at the sleeve. "We'll get you something that fits," he said. "Tomorrow." Her eyes widened. "Tomorrow." "Yes." She smiled then, small and careful, like she didn't trust it yet. "Thank you." Dinner was quiet. Lena ate slowly, savoring each bite, as if afraid the food might vanish. Ethan watched, pretending to focus on his own plate. He noticed how she pushed vegetables aside, how she hummed softly when she liked something. These details felt dangerously intimate. Afterward, he walked her back to the room. She climbed into bed obediently, pulling the blanket up to her chin. As he turned to leave, her voice stopped him. "Will you stay until I fall asleep?" His instinct was to say no. Boundaries. Distance. Safety. Instead, he sat in the chair by the bed. Lena watched him for a moment. "Do you know what a dad does?" she asked sleepily. He hesitated. "I'm not sure." "They don't leave when it gets hard," she said, eyes already drifting closed. "That's what my mom said." Her breathing evened out. Ethan sat there long after she slept, the weight of her words pressing down on him. He didn't notice the tears until they blurred his vision again. Later that night, unable to rest, he went back to his study and began making calls not to lawyers, but to someone else. A private investigator. A name. A past he'd ignored. Because if Lena was telling the truth, his entire life was built on an absence he could no longer deny. The investigator's voice was calm, almost bored, as if Ethan hadn't just dropped a grenade into his own life. Names, dates, locations were exchanged in clipped sentences. When the call ended, the silence in the study felt louder than before. Ethan leaned back, staring at the ceiling, trying to remember the man he had been before everything became about numbers and margins. That man felt distant, like a photograph fading in the sun. A small sound pulled him from his thoughts. Soft footsteps. He turned just as Lena appeared in the doorway, clutching the blanket around her shoulders. "I couldn't sleep," she said, as if apologizing for an inconvenience. He checked the clock. Nearly midnight. "Did something scare you?" She shook her head. "It's too quiet." The words surprised him. Silence was his sanctuary. To her, it was a warning. He stood and walked toward her, lowering himself so they were eye to eye. "You can stay here if you want," he said. "Or I can sit with you again." She considered this, then padded into the room without waiting for permission, curling up on the couch like she'd been there 100 times. Ethan hesitated, then sat in the chair opposite her. "Can I ask you something?" she murmured. "Yes." "Why do you look sad when you look at me?" The question struck with surgical precision. He opened his mouth, then closed it. How could he explain regret to someone who had survived on hope? "I'm not sad because of you," he said carefully. "I'm sad because I might have missed something important." She nodded, accepting this answer more easily than he expected. "My mom used to look like that too." The name hovered on his tongue again. Mara. What was she like? Lena's eyes brightened. "She sang when she cooked. Even when we didn't have much, she'd make songs out of nothing." Her voice softened. "She said songs help you remember who you are." Ethan felt a tightness in his chest. He tried to picture Mara singing, her tired smile, the courage it must have taken to raise a child alone while fighting illness. He had been building an empire, oblivious. "Did she ever try to contact me?" he asked quietly. Lena shook her head. "She said you had your own world. She didn't want to break it." That world felt brittle now, like glass under pressure. He stood and poured himself a glass of water he didn't drink. "If she were here," he asked, "what do you think she'd want?" Lena thought for a long moment. "She'd want you to tell the truth," she said. "Even if it hurts." The simplicity of it stole his breath. He nodded slowly, committing the words to memory. By morning, the house felt different. Staff moved with unusual softness, voices lowered. Lena ate breakfast at the counter, feet swinging above the floor. Ethan watched her between sips of coffee, noting how quickly she adapted, how she made herself small without being asked. It unsettled him. A knock echoed through the house. The investigator had moved faster than promised. Ethan's pulse quickened as he took the envelope, heavy with documents. "Can I see?" Lena asked, peering at it. "Not yet," he said, tucking it under his arm. "Later." He retreated to the study again, heart pounding as he opened the file. Photos slid out first. Mara, younger than he remembered, holding a newborn wrapped in a faded blanket. Lena. The resemblance was undeniable now, the curve of the cheek, the eyes. Medical records followed. Birth certificates. DNA probability estimates based on available data. Not definitive, but close enough to make denial feel like cowardice. A knock interrupted him again. This time it was one of his security men, face tight. "Sir," he said quietly, "there's a situation." "What kind?" "Press." Someone tipped them off. "They're outside the gates." Ethan closed his eyes. So this was how it would collide with reality. He thought of Lena downstairs, unaware, finally relaxed. Panic flared, sharp and protective. "Keep them out," he said. "No statements." "And the child?" Ethan's voice hardened. "She's not to be seen." The guard nodded and left. Ethan exhaled, running a hand through his hair. He looked down at the photos again, then folded them carefully back into the envelope. When he returned downstairs, Lena was sitting on the rug, lining up toy cars someone had thoughtfully provided. "Are you leaving?" she asked, reading his tension instantly. "No," he said. "But some people want to talk to me." "Bad people. Curious people," he corrected. "They don't always know when to stop." She frowned. "Will they take me away?" The question sliced through him. "No," he said firmly, surprising himself with the certainty in his tone. "No one is taking you anywhere." Her shoulders relaxed a fraction. "Okay." He crouched beside her. "I need you to stay upstairs for a little while." "Can you do that?" She nodded, then hesitated. "You'll come back?" "Yes." She studied his face, searching for cracks. Finding none, she stood and went obediently toward the stairs. Halfway up, she turned back. "Mr. Ethan?" "Yes." "If you don't want to be my dad," she said softly, "I can still stay quiet." "I'm good at that." The words landed like a confession. He crossed the room in 2 strides and knelt in front of her, gripping her small shoulders gently. "You should never have to earn a place by being quiet," he said, voice rough. "Not here." She blinked, then nodded, climbing the rest of the stairs without another word. Outside, voices rose beyond the gates. Questions shouted. Assumptions formed. Ethan stood alone in the living room, the weight of 2 futures pressing on him, one public and unforgiving, the other small, fragile, and already changing him in ways he didn't yet understand. Upstairs, a door clicked softly shut. The click of the door echoed longer than it should have. Ethan remained where he was, staring at the staircase as if Lena might come back down, as if this fragile truce between his past and present might shatter the moment he looked away. Outside, the noise swelled, reporters calling his name, cameras snapping, speculation already fermenting into narrative. He straightened his jacket, schooling his face into the mask the world recognized. The gates opened just enough to let his legal counsel slip inside. "You should make a statement," she said immediately, eyes sharp. "Silence invites invention." "So does truth," he replied. She paused, studying him. "Is there truth we should know about?" Ethan didn't answer. He walked past her toward the windows, watching the press cluster like a living thing. "I'm not giving them anything," he said. "Not today." "Then they'll dig," she warned. "If there's a child involved." "There is no involved," he cut in, then softened his tone. "There is a child who needs time." His counsel sighed. "Time is expensive." "So am I." The meeting ended without agreement. When the gates finally closed again and the noise dulled to a distant hum, Ethan let out a breath he'd been holding since the plaza. He went upstairs slowly, each step deliberate, as if rushing might undo something. He stopped outside Lena's room, listening. Silence. Then a soft hum, tuneless, familiar. He knocked lightly. "It's me." The door opened a crack. Lena peeked out, eyes cautious but hopeful. "Are they gone?" "For now." She opened the door wider. The room looked smaller with her in it, like it had finally been claimed. She sat on the bed, tucking her legs under herself. "They sounded loud." "They're curious," he said again. "And impatient." She nodded. "People get like that when they want answers." He sat in the chair by the window. "You seem to know a lot about people." She shrugged. "You learn when you don't have much else." He studied her, the way she avoided eye contact when she felt uncertain, the way she listened more than she spoke. It was unsettling how familiar it felt. "Lena," he said carefully, "there are some things happening that might get confusing." "Confusing is okay," she said. "I've had confusing before. That doesn't mean you should have more." She swung her feet. "Are you mad at me?" The question caught him off guard. "No. Why would I be?" "Because things got loud after I came," she said simply. "Sometimes that happens." Ethan felt a flash of anger not at her, but at a world that had taught her to blame herself for attention. "This isn't your fault," he said firmly. "None of it." She searched his face again, then seemed to accept it. "Okay." Hours passed in a strange suspension. Phone calls he didn't answer. Messages he ignored. Lena dozed off again, curled on the bed with one hand clutching the blanket. Ethan watched her sleep, the rise and fall of her chest steady and trusting. Trust. The word felt heavy. Dangerous. Near evening, his phone buzzed with a new alert, an unknown number. Against his better judgment, he answered. "Mr. Vale," a man's voice said. "This is Child Protective Services. We've received a report." Ethan's grip tightened. "About what?" "About a minor in your residence without documented guardianship." He closed his eyes. It had begun. "She's safe," he said. "And she's not leaving tonight." There was a pause. "We need to assess the situation." "Tomorrow," Ethan replied. "With my attorney present." Another pause, longer this time. "Tomorrow," the man agreed. When the call ended, Ethan sat back, heart pounding. He looked at Lena, still asleep, unaware that systems and procedures were circling her like sharks. He stood quietly and left the room, pulling the door almost closed almost. In the study, he spread the documents out again, this time with ruthless focus. He made another call, then another. A genetic test expedited. Hospital archives requested. Flight records pulled from a decade ago. Each step felt like crossing a line he'd drawn long before he knew why. A soft knock startled him. He turned to see Lena standing there again, eyes bleary. "You left the door open," she said. "I didn't mean to wake you." She shrugged. "It's okay. I dreamed my mom was singing." Then she stopped. Something in her voice made his chest ache. "What happened after?" "She told me to listen," Lena said. "For the truth." Ethan felt the words settle into him, heavy and unavoidable. "Come here," he said gently. She climbed onto the couch beside him, tucking her feet under herself. He hesitated only a second before placing a hand awkwardly on her shoulder. She leaned into it without hesitation, as if she'd been waiting. "Lena," he said quietly, "if it turns out that if the truth is what you think it is." She looked up at him. "You'll still be you." He almost laughed, a broken sound. "And what about you?" "I'll still be me," she said. "Just not alone." The simplicity of it unraveled him. He nodded, unable to speak for a moment. Outside, the city lights flickered on, one by one, like stars struggling through the haze. A phone buzzed on the desk. This time, he checked the message. A single line from the investigator. "Found something. Call me." Ethan's pulse quickened. He looked down at Lena, her head resting against his arm, eyes half closed. "I need to make a call," he said. "I'll wait," she replied. As he stepped away, he felt the weight of the moment answers approaching, consequences looming. The truth was coming, whether he was ready or not. And somewhere between the ringing phone and the quiet breathing of the child behind him, Ethan Vale realized there was no version of this future where he walked away unchanged. The investigator didn't waste time with pleasantries. His voice came through the phone low and deliberate, the kind that suggested years of delivering news people weren't ready to hear. "I found the hospital," he said. Not the one on the discharge form. The other one. Ethan gripped the edge of the desk. What other one? The form you have is a transfer document, the man replied. Your surgery was moved mid-procedure due to complications. You were unconscious longer than the official record shows. Ethan's mind raced, rearranging memories. The fog. The missing hours. Go on. Mara didn't leave after you woke up, the investigator continued. She stayed. 4 weeks. She visited you every day. Ethan's breath caught. That's not possible. I would remember. You were heavily medicated. And there's more, the man said. She was pregnant when she arrived at the hospital. Early stages. The attending physician noted it but didn't disclose it to you. Silence roared in Ethan's ears. Are you saying? I'm saying the timeline fits, the investigator replied. Perfectly. Ethan closed his eyes. Images collided. Mara's hand in his, the quiet jokes, the way she'd looked at him like he mattered even when he was helpless. Guilt surged, hot and suffocating. There's something else, the investigator added. Mara tried to reach you years later. Emails. Letters. They never reached you. Ethan's eyes snapped open. Why? Your former chief of staff intercepted them, the man said. He marked them as non-priority. Personal correspondence. The betrayal cut deep. Where is he now? Retired. Living quietly. But that's not the most urgent part, the investigator said. Child Services is moving faster than expected. They're questioning the shelter records. Someone flagged Lena as vulnerable. Ethan looked toward the doorway, where Lena still waited patiently, humming under her breath. What do I do? There was a pause. You prepare to fight, the investigator said. And you decide what you're willing to lose. The call ended. Ethan stood there, unmoving, until Lena's voice pulled him back. Are you okay? He turned. She was standing in the doorway again, watching him with that unsettling calm. He crossed the room and crouched in front of her. I'm angry, he admitted. But not at you. She nodded, as if that made sense. Grown-ups get angry when they find missing pieces. Yes, he said softly. Something like that. A knock at the door interrupted them. This time, it wasn't gentle. 2 firm raps. Security's voice followed. Sir, CPS is here. They won't wait. Ethan straightened slowly. Lena's fingers curled into his sleeve. Are they the people who decide things? She asked. Yes. Do they decide about me? Yes. She swallowed, then surprised him by standing taller. Can I stay with you? The request was simple. The answer was anything but. Ethan looked down at her, at the small hand gripping his expensive coat, and made a decision that felt like stepping off a cliff. Yes, he said. You stay with me. He took her hand and walked to the living room. 2 officials stood near the entrance, clipboards in hand, expressions carefully neutral. Their eyes flicked to Lena, then to him. Mr. Vale, one of them said. We need to speak with the child alone. No, Ethan replied calmly. This is standard procedure. She's not a procedure, he said, voice firm but controlled. And she's not alone. The woman hesitated, then nodded slightly. Very well. But we will need documentation. You'll have it, Ethan said. Soon. They began asking questions. Where Lena had been found. How long she'd stayed. What arrangements were being made. Lena answered when spoken to, voice steady, eyes never leaving Ethan's face. Each time she finished, she leaned closer to him, grounding herself. At one point, the man from CPS asked, Do you consider Mr. Vale your father? The room went very still. Lena looked up at Ethan. He felt his heart hammer, unsure whether to speak or stay silent. She turned back to the man. "I think he's trying," she said. The answer seemed to catch everyone off guard. The woman from CPS made a note. After what felt like hours, they finally left, promising follow-ups, evaluations, court involvement. The door closed behind them with a heavy finality. Lena exhaled, her shoulders sagging. "Did I do okay?" she asked. Ethan knelt in front of her, eyes shining. "You did more than okay." She smiled faintly, then frowned. "They might make me go somewhere else." "They might try," he said honestly. "But I won't let them do it without a fight." She nodded, absorbing the words. "My mom said fights are loud, but love is quiet." Ethan swallowed hard. Your mom was wise. That night, sleep didn't come easily. Ethan sat at the edge of the bed in the guest room while Lena lay awake, staring at the ceiling. "Can you tell me a story?" she asked. He hesitated. "I'm not very good at that." "Just something true," she said. He thought for a moment. "Once," he began slowly, "there was a boy who thought being alone made him strong. He built walls so high that no one could get in." "And was he strong?" Lena asked. "He was safe," Ethan replied. "But he was empty." She turned her head toward him. "What happened to him?" "One day," Ethan continued, voice thickening, "someone small knocked on his wall and asked for help." Lena smiled. "That's a good story." He brushed a strand of hair from her forehead, the gesture instinctive. She didn't flinch. Instead, she closed her eyes. In the darkness of the room, Ethan's phone vibrated again. A message from the lab. Preliminary DNA comparison ready. His breath caught. He looked at Lena, already drifting toward sleep, trusting him with a future he hadn't earned yet. The phone buzzed again, insistent. Answers were finally within reach. And with them, a truth that could either save them both or tear everything apart. Ethan waited until Lena's breathing slowed into the steady rhythm of sleep before he stood. He moved as quietly as possible, like a thief in his own house, carrying the weight of a truth he hadn't yet opened. In the hallway, the glow from his phone felt too bright, too loud. He stepped into the study and closed the door behind him. The message from the lab stared back at him, clinical and indifferent. Preliminary results indicated a 99.6% probability of paternity. For a long moment, he couldn't breathe. He sat down heavily, hands braced on the desk, staring at the screen as if it might change if he looked long enough. 99.6. The number felt absurd in its precision. Not certainty, but close enough to rearrange a life. Close enough to explain why a child's eyes had felt like a mirror. He covered his face with his hands. The tears came silently this time, spilling through his fingers without resistance. He wasn't crying because he was happy. He wasn't crying because he was afraid. He was crying because a door he'd sealed years ago had just been forced open, and everything he'd locked behind it came rushing out at once. Mara. Lena. The years in between. When the wave passed, he straightened slowly. He reread the message, forcing his mind into motion. Preliminary meant more tests. Legal confirmations. Court admissibility. But it was enough to act on. Enough to stop pretending this was hypothetical. He reached for his phone and dialed his attorney. "I need emergency filings prepared," he said the moment she answered. "Temporary guardianship. Custody intent. Everything." There was a pause. "Is this about the child?" "Yes," Ethan said. "And she's mine." Silence stretched on the line. "Biologically." "Yes." "Then this changes things," she said carefully. "But it also complicates them." "I don't care," Ethan replied. "I'm not losing her." When he hung up, the study felt different, less like a place of control and more like a battlefield. He stood and walked to the window, staring out at the city lights. Somewhere out there, people were already piecing together theories. Somewhere, systems were moving, files opening, decisions being drafted without ever seeing Lena's face. He turned away sharply and went back upstairs. Lena stirred as he entered the room, eyes fluttering open. "Did you finish your call?" she murmured. "Yes," he said, sitting beside her. His voice sounded unfamiliar to his own ears, softer, steadier. "Go back to sleep." She watched him for a moment. "You're shaking." He hadn't noticed. He took a slow breath. "I just learned something important." "Good or bad?" He hesitated. "Both." She seemed satisfied with that answer. Her eyes closed again, but her hand reached out blindly until it found his sleeve. She held on. Ethan didn't move until he was sure she was asleep again. Morning came too quickly. The house woke in layers, staff moving quietly, phones buzzing, security tightening. Ethan barely noticed. He sat at the kitchen table with Lena, helping her pour cereal, listening to her describe a dream about flying over the city. "I think my mom helped me," she said matter-of-factly. "I think she did too," he replied. A car pulled into the driveway. Ethan's jaw tightened as he recognized the emblem. CPS, again. This time, they were accompanied by a woman in a tailored suit carrying a leather briefcase. "They're back," Lena said softly. "Yes," Ethan replied. He stood and knelt in front of her. "Remember what I said yesterday?" "That I'm staying with you," she said. "And that hasn't changed," he said firmly. "No matter what happens today." She nodded, trusting him with a faith that terrified him more than any headline ever had. The meeting was tense from the start. Papers were presented. Questions asked. The woman in the suit introduced herself as a court-appointed family liaison. She spoke kindly, professionally, as if discussing logistics instead of lives. "We've received preliminary information suggesting a biological connection," she said. "But until it's legally confirmed." "I'm aware," Ethan said. "And I've initiated the process." The CPS representative cleared his throat. "In the meantime, the child's welfare is our priority." "So is mine," Ethan replied evenly. They asked Lena questions again. Where she felt safe. Who she trusted. She answered honestly, simply. Each time, her eyes flicked to Ethan, anchoring herself. When it was over, the liaison closed her briefcase. "We'll be in touch," she said. "This will move quickly." After they left, Lena let out a long breath. "They always talk like I'm not in the room," she said. Ethan knelt beside her. "I'm sorry." She shrugged. "I'm used to it." He clenched his jaw, anger sparking again, not loud, but focused. "You shouldn't have to be." That afternoon, his phone rang with a number he hadn't seen in years. His former chief of staff. Ethan stared at the screen for a long moment before answering. "You've made a mess," the man said without preamble. "You intercepted her letters," Ethan replied coldly. A pause. "I was protecting you." "You decided what I deserved to know," Ethan said. "And what she deserved." "She chose not to fight," the man snapped. "She walked away." "No," Ethan said quietly. "You made sure I never had the chance to walk toward her." The call ended abruptly. Ethan stood there, chest heaving, the final thread of his old life snapping cleanly. That evening, Lena sat beside him on the couch, drawing with colored pencils someone had bought her. She held up a picture, a tall figure with messy hair and a smaller one holding his hand. "That's us," she said. He smiled faintly. "You draw me taller." "Than I am." She grinned. "That's because you're still growing." The words lingered long after she went to bed. Late that night, as Ethan reviewed legal documents and test confirmations, another message came in. This one wasn't from a lab or a lawyer. It was from a journalist he trusted more than most. They know about the child. Someone leaked the DNA test. Story drops in the morning. Ethan closed his eyes slowly. Tomorrow, the world would know. Ethan didn't sleep at all. He sat in the dark living room, phone face down on the table, watching the faint reflection of city lights crawl across the ceiling. Every instinct he had spent a lifetime sharpening told him to prepare statements, control the narrative, get ahead of the damage. But another instinct, new, unfamiliar, and terrifyingly strong, told him to go upstairs and simply watch Lena breathe, as if that alone might protect her from what morning would bring. Just before dawn, he did exactly that. Lena slept curled on her side, one hand tucked beneath her cheek, the other wrapped around the edge of the blanket. Her face was peaceful, untouched by the storm gathering beyond the walls. Ethan stood in the doorway longer than necessary, memorizing the moment, because something inside him knew it would not be preserved. His phone vibrated again. Another message. Screenshots this time. Headlines already drafted. Billionaire's secret child? Shock claims link Ethan Vale to homeless girl. DNA test leak sparks custody questions. He shut the phone off. By the time Lena woke, the house had changed. Security doubled. Curtains drawn. Staff speaking in whispers. He noticed immediately. "Did I do something wrong?" she asked. "Over breakfast?" "No," Ethan said too quickly. He softened his tone. "People are talking. That's all. About me?" "Yes." She nodded slowly, pushing cereal around her bowl. "Are they saying bad things?" "Some of them," he admitted. "Some of them don't understand." She looked up at him then, eyes sharp, despite her small face. "Will they make you stop liking me?" The question hit him harder than any accusation ever could. He set his spoon down carefully. "Nothing can do that." She studied him for a long second, then accepted the answer. "Okay." A television flickered on in another room. Despite explicit instructions, Ethan heard his name, the familiar cadence of speculation wrapped in urgency. He stood and turned it off himself. The first official call came mid-morning. Court date scheduled. Emergency hearing. Temporary placement to be decided. They may ask her questions alone. His attorney warned over the phone. "No," Ethan said flatly. "They can insist. Then I'll insist harder." He ended the call and leaned against the counter, pressing his fingers into his temples. Lena sat at the table, drawing. Again, humming under her breath. "Are we going somewhere?" she asked, without looking up. "Yes," he said. "Later. Together." Yes. That seemed to matter most. The car ride to the courthouse was silent. Lena watched the city pass by, slower than usual due to traffic. Building near the press barricades. Cameras flashed as they arrived, shouts erupting from behind barriers. "Is that because of me?" Lena whispered. Ethan stepped out first, blocking her view instinctively. He held out his hand. "Stay close." She took it. Inside, the building smelled like old paper and disinfectant. People stared. Some with curiosity, some with judgment, some with something sharper. Lena squeezed his hand once, grounding him as much as he grounded her. They were led into a waiting room. Minutes stretched. Then a woman entered, older, kind-eyed, carrying a thin file. "I'm Dr. Halvorson," she said gently. "I'm here to talk to Lena." Lena looked up at Ethan. "I'll be right outside," he said, forcing calm into his voice. "You don't have to answer anything you don't want to." She nodded, then surprised him by standing on her toes and whispering, "I'll tell the truth." The door closed. Ethan paced. His heart hammered so loudly. He was sure everyone could hear it. He replayed every moment since the plaza. Every word, every look. Had he done enough? Had he done something wrong? The door finally opened. Lena walked out first, face unreadable. Dr. Halvorson followed, her expression thoughtful. "She's very articulate," the woman said, "and very attached to you." Ethan exhaled. "Is that bad?" "It's honest," she replied. "But honesty complicates things." Before he could ask what she meant, a clerk appeared and called his name. The hearing began without ceremony. The judge was stern, efficient, unmoved. By headlines, facts were presented. Allegations acknowledged. DNA probability discussed but not yet legally binding. Lena sat beside Ethan, legs swinging nervously. At one point, the judge looked directly at her. "Lena," he said, voice measured, "do you feel safe with Mr. Vale?" "Yes," she answered immediately. "Why?" She thought for a moment. "Because he doesn't disappear when things get scary." A murmur rippled through the room. The judge leaned back slightly, studying Ethan in a new light. After what felt like hours, the decision came: temporary placement granted pending final confirmation. Lena would remain with Ethan under supervision. The gavel fell. Lena didn't fully understand what it meant, but she felt the shift. As they left the courtroom, she smiled for the first time that day. "Does that mean I'm staying?" she asked. "Yes," Ethan said, voice thick. "For now." Outside, the press surged. Microphones thrust forward. Questions fired like bullets. "Is she really your daughter? Did you hide her? What kind of father are you?" Ethan stopped. He turned, shielding Lena with his body, and spoke once. "She's a child," he said evenly, "and she deserves privacy. That's all I'll say." He walked away before anyone could ask another question. Back at the house, exhaustion finally set in. Lena curled up on the couch, head resting against his side. He let her. "Are you tired?" she asked. "Yes," he admitted. "Me too," she said. "But in a good way." He smiled faintly. That night, as she slept, Ethan sat alone. Again, scrolling through messages he hadn't read. Support. Condemnation. Threats. Offers. One message stood out, buried among the noise. An email. No subject line. It was from an address he didn't recognize. "You should know the truth about Lena's mother. Not the version you remember." Attached was a scanned document. Medical records. Notes in a different handwriting. Ethan's breath caught as he read the first line. Diagnosis revised. Patient Mara K. did not die of natural causes. The screen seemed to tilt in his hands. Outside, thunder rolled low and distant, echoing through the city like a warning. The thunder broke open the night as Ethan stared at the document, every word rearranging his understanding of the past. Mara's death had not been an ending shaped by fate or illness. It had been interrupted, redirected, stolen. The note spoke of negligence, of a clinic that cut corners, of warnings ignored because the patient was poor and quiet and alone. The truth arrived without mercy, but it arrived nonetheless, and with it came a clarity Ethan had never known. He didn't feel rage first. He felt responsibility. By morning, the storm had washed the city clean. Lena woke to sunlight spilling across the floor and found Ethan already dressed, sitting beside her bed with a steadiness she had come to recognize as real. He didn't smile to hide fear. He didn't rush her awake. He simply waited. "Are you leaving?" she asked, blinking sleep from her eyes. "No," he said. "I'm staying. And I'm not running from what comes next." She nodded, trusting the words because they were quiet and because he had learned to keep quiet promises. What followed unfolded not in dramatic shouts but in deliberate steps. Ethan reopened files that powerful people preferred forgotten. He confronted institutions that thrived on silence. Lawyers warned him of consequences, of reputational fallout, of battles that would drag on for years. He listened, and then he moved forward anyway. Because for the first time, his fight was not about winning, it was about making something right. When the final DNA confirmation arrived, it felt almost ceremonial. The numbers sealed what the heart had already claimed. In the courtroom, the judge spoke of best interests and legal bonds, but it was Lena's small hand slipping into Ethan's that told the truest story. Adoption papers followed, formalizing what had quietly become fact. Ethan Vale was no longer a man defined by absence. He was a father. The press eventually lost interest. Outrage grew tired when there was no scandal to feed it, only consistency. Ethan refused interviews. He refused to monetize the truth. Instead, he funded clinics that treated patients without asking what they could pay. He established scholarships that bore Mara's name, not as a gesture of guilt, but as an act of remembrance. Lena helped choose the logo, a simple songbird. There were hard days. Nights when Lena woke from dreams where her mother's voice faded too quickly. Mornings when Ethan struggled to balance boardrooms with school drop-offs and parent-teacher meetings. He learned that strength wasn't the absence of fear, but the decision to show up anyway. He learned that money could open doors, but love kept them open. On the anniversary of Mara's death, they visited the small cemetery beyond the city. Lena placed flowers carefully, humming under her breath. Ethan stood beside her, hat in hand, feeling the weight of gratitude and regret share the same space without canceling each other out. "She would have liked you like this," Lena said softly. "I wish I'd known her longer," he replied. "She knew you enough," Lena said. "She chose you." The years unfolded with a gentler rhythm. Lena grew taller, louder, braver. Ethan grew softer, wiser, and more patient than he'd ever believed possible. The house filled with music, not the kind piped through speakers, but the kind born in kitchens and car rides and laughter that startled guests and used to seeing the billionaire smile. One evening, long after the city lights had come on, Lena asked a question that carried the echo of the one that had started it all. "Do you think I saved you?" she asked. Ethan considered the question, then answered without hesitation. "I think we found each other when we needed it most." She smiled, satisfied. The truth about Mara eventually reshaped policy. Quiet settlements became public standards. Names that once hid behind authority learned that invisibility could be taken away by persistence and light. Ethan never claimed credit. He simply kept going. Years later, when Lena stood on a stage to receive an award for her work advocating for children without guardians, she scanned the crowd until she found Ethan. He wasn't in the front row. He never insisted on being seen. But he was there, eyes shining, hands clasped, exactly where he belonged. She spoke about courage, about asking impossible questions, about the power of one honest moment to change a life. She didn't name him. She didn't need to. The applause rose anyway, full and unrestrained. Afterward, as they walked out into the cool evening, Lena slipped her arm through his. "Thank you for crying that day," she said. He laughed softly. "Thank you for asking." The city hummed around them, alive and indifferent, as cities always are. But somewhere within its vastness, A little girl who had once asked a stranger to be her dad had grown into a woman who knew exactly what love looked like. And a young billionaire who had once believed in walls had learned that the strongest thing a person can build is a home. They walked on together, not because the past had been erased, but because it had been transformed. And in that transformation, they found something greater than wealth, louder than headlines, and more enduring than truth revealed too late. They found a future chosen, every single day.